Blue Loitong Bam, who's the founder and director of Human Rights Alert. Bablu's going to speak first. Bablu leads the human rights movement in northeast India. He's a founding member of the Working Group on Human Rights in India and the UN. He's active in the emerging human rights and terrorism debate. So I'm going to hand over to Bablu.
Thank you, Jenny. We have two panels, and I will basically start off with introducing a little bit about the region and also the context in which we are talking about. Can go to the first slide, please. We are talking about northeast India, and the map shows where we are talking about. It's the part of India where, which is almost east of Bangladesh, bordering Burma, China, Bhutan, and connected with the rest of the country with a very small corridor. Has been not very hurt off part of the country, and there is a whole history behind it. If you can go to the next slide. This was northeast India when the British first came in and saw it. It was a dozen of small kingdoms which signed treaty with the British, and then gradually different. Yeah, we need to change it to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is how the British found northeast India. This was Henry Yule, cartographer, trying to portray northeast region in the 1500s. Like many other parts of the world, they signed treaties with the British, and then several wars were fought, and finally it became a part of the British India. And of course, Burma was also part of British India. And the first isolation started with the division of the India office and the Burma office. So the eastern part of that northeast India was kind of sealed off. In 1944, this was also the part of the country, of Asia, where the Second World War actually tilted from an aggression by the Japanese, by the Allied beating back the Japanese. So our claim to fame of our region is that that's where the Second World War actually changed the tide. 47, India got independent, and East Pakistan was formed. So we were cut off again on the west, and 1949 came the merger of the kingdoms of Manipur and Tripura into the Indian Union. 1962 again, the strategic significance of this region came up because of the war between India and China. 1971 came the liberation of Bangladesh, and in 1975 another entity called Sikkim was added with annexation of Sikkim into the Indian Union. This is how the Northeast looks like today. It consists of 7 sister states, plus we call it a brother, Sikkim. It's about 50 million people with 213 tribes, primarily rural, and less developed in terms of infrastructure in the whole country. There was a gradual process of deindustrialization of the economy, isolated from the rest of the world. People, until last year, required an additional permission to enter into that region, even with a valid Indian visa. That has become a place where drug and HIV/AIDS is an issue. Mining of petroleum, uranium, coal takes in a large number. And it becomes really a key area because of India's Look East policy and increasing integration of Asian economy. So this region has become kind of a land bridge between South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Far East Asia. From our perspective of today, this is also perhaps the most militarized region of the country, and where there are some 79 armed groups operating of various ethnic formation, out of which 10 has been listed as terrorist under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So the whole, if we have to look a little deeper into the history, again the terrorism debate, it all started with the self-determination movement of the indigenous groups who wanted to resist the increasing control over this region by the new post-colonial Indian state. And a response to this was the law for the Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958, which basically authorized the military of the central government to do the policing work in this region. And incidentally, the date in which this law was signed by the President of India was 9/11. So we call it the the first 9/11 of the country. And this disturbed area where these law operates, instead of shrinking, gradually spread over the decades. It spread to the entire region by 1980, and in 1990 actually this law was also in place in Jammu and Kashmir. So these are the only two regions where this law is in place. And I think this falls classically into what would be called an ugly counterterrorism policy, where rape, extrajudicial execution, disappearances, torture is institutionalized with impunity and a cycle of violence that comes in. In the heart of it, of this issue, is the whole issue of the self-determination and how India looks at it. It of course has a reservation on Article 1 of both the covenants. The Constitution of India recognizes the territory which are acquired into India as a territory of India. But when people want to talk about getting outside, then the only law that is applied is what we call the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and it defines terrorism also as secession of part of the territory of India, includes the assertion of any claim to determine whether such part would remain a part of the territory of India. And considering the history of this region, many people still want to articulate their problem in terms of a self-determination or national liberation issue. So these are the list of 10 organizations which are declared as terrorist organizations in this region under this new Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And there are also several apparatuses which has been put into place, including very old colonial laws like the Seditious Meeting Prevention Act, under which many people who talk about self-determination are arrested for organizing seditious meeting, Official Secret Act, National Security Act. Then of course, in post-2001, there are also many new apparatuses which has come up, including Multi-Agency Center, National Investigation Agency, the National Information Grid, National Threat Reduction Organization, National Counterterrorism Center. This is now being debated upon, and there is a lot of criticism on how many people feel that this, especially the governments in the states, feel that this clearly violates the federal principle in which the government of India, the Constitution talks about. Now, yeah, we talk about four pillars of counterterrorism, but the four pillars of the counterterrorism policy that the UN is propagating seems to be inhabiting mostly the External Affairs Ministry of the Government of India. If you go to the Home Ministry, which actually deals with the security question, it is actually governed by another set of four principles, which comes out from a very ancient text of Arthasastra, which is which we call the Indian, the Kautilya principles, which basically talks of what they call Sham, Danda, Sam, Dam, Danda, and Ved. This is a principle that has come out from an ancient text of the Kautilyas. This was just after Alexander the Great came and invaded India. And these kind of principles continue to inhabit the security thinking. So the first Sham talks about reconciliation. The first attempt is, if there is a rebellion or a dissident, try and pacify them by reconciliation. But of course, all the reconciliation process have also resulted to some kind of an devolution of power, but the issue of self-determination is still an untouchable, and therefore many of the issues still continue to fester. Dham, or the monetary inducement, is another approach which resulted into endemic corruption in these conflict areas, including the northeast, as well as perhaps in Kashmir. Danda is the force, and this is where the most ugly part of it has come about, and all those legislations, laws, militarization of this region comes into this. And the last, which is very crucial, is Ved, which is about splitting. So Northeast today also sees a huge amount of division amongst ethnic groups as well as among fractional fights. The breathing space that we could achieve in these areas to be able to work actually came from the UN Human Rights Committee, which was while examining India's third periodic report in 1997. We have had the opportunity to engage with them, and they had come out with some really good observation. I would love to read this recommendation, which came in a way created a space for us to be able to register a first formal human rights organization in this. The committee remained concerned with the continuing reliance of special powers under legislation such as the Armed Forces, the Public Safety Act, National Security in areas declared to be disturbed, and its serious human rights violations, in particular with the respect of Articles 6, 7, 9, and 14 of the Covenant, committed by the security forces acting under this law, as well as by the paramilitaries and the insurgent groups. The committee, noting that the examination of the constitutionality of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, long pending before the Supreme Court, is due to be heard in August 1997, hopes that it will provide, its provision will also be examined of its compatibility with the Covenant. In this respect, bearing in mind the provisions of Article 1, 19, and 25 of the Covenant, which is our self-determination, freedom of expression, and effective participation, the committee endorses the view of the National Human Rights Commission that problems in this area affected by terrorism and armed insurgency are essentially political in character, and that the approach to resolving such problems must also essentially be political, and emphasize that terrorism should be fought with means that are compatible to the Covenant. And this was perhaps the first time that we could use the UN Human Rights Committee in an effective way to be able to address this. Similarly, of late, India have also extended an open invitation to the special rapporteurs, and the first report on a series of special rapporteurs who have visited is the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defender. And in her last report, which was submitted in the Human Rights Council, she also made mention of the situation there, which, and I read, at the time of visit, Manipur was reported that the state was affected by militarization, with more than half a dozen human rights groups having been branded as terrorists due to their self-determination advocacy work. Since 2000, Irom Sharmila, who has been on a hunger strike to demand the repeal of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, has been forcefully detained and force-fed in a hospital in Imphal. For 10 years, National Human Rights Commission reportedly never visited Ms. Sharmila despite repeated requests by defenders. The Special Rapporteur thanked Ms. Sharmila for her letter read by her brother during a visit in Guwahati. So the struggle of people continues, and the little space that we are getting using the human rights committees as well as Special Rapporteur, and also the other Special Rapporteur which has visited most recently is the Special Rapporteur on execution, extrajudicial summary and arbitrary execution. And there also he has commented very strongly on the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, saying that it in fact allowed the states to override rights in disturbed areas in a much more intrusive way than it would have been the case under state of emergency, since right to life is in fact suspended, and it is done without the safeguard applicable in states of emergency. Well, this is Irom Sharmila, who has been on the hunger strike since 2000, which human rights defenders, Special Rapporteur have not mentioned. So the struggle in these areas goes on. Among many things that we are trying to deal with, besides getting away with the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, is also the whole question of the right to food. So many alliances are being formed, and I would leave Cordaid to fill in the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a fascinating and slightly, somewhat disturbing presentation from Babu there. If you have questions or comments or things to say about that, please just make a note of them.